Is there a problem, officer?
Not anymore, motherfucker.
What is going on with these old rockers here? They refuse to retire. And it's so weird. Check out this Stevie Nicks clip here. Now pay attention. Right here. Pay attention to that tambourine. It is completely out of time. Watch her as she, tries to play it, and watch as the actual tambourine comes up in the mix. The tambourine is in time. That's playing on the quote-unquote live concert. Look at that. Look at that. It's out of time. Come on, dude. So, if your grandmother got up there and she was singing and dancing at the bar and playing a tambourine out of time, it's cute, it's funny, but you don't say to your grandma, Grandma, we should take this on tour. They won't give it up. And it's like, it's the Zoomers' fault almost for not making good music. So all these people in their fucking 70s and 80s are out there touring. It's ridiculous. Hang it up while you're ahead. Back in the day, Iggy Pop said he was retiring or something like that. He was done. And I thought he meant from everything. And I was like, right on, Jimmy. Good idea. Get out while you're ahead. Stop and keep your legacy intact, But that wasn't the case, man. I guess he was done making albums. I was a big Stooges fan back in the day. And and here Iggy Pop is out there still doing shit. Dude, you would have been so much better off had you just stopped, It's like they are intent on destroying their own legacies. It's like no one is telling them no as they get older. Like, that's a bad idea, dude. Don't do that. So you have all these people up there rocking out with Depends on and shit. And it's insanity. And it just shows where we're at in this world where everything is upside down. When I was a kid, these musicians from the, like the late 60s, the hippie era, they were already old hat. You didn't see a whole lot of kids at their shows. Now that these people are like, 80, there are like younger and younger people at these shows because they don't have any real live music to watch that they're creating. And the internet is forever. It's not like they're doing this back in the 80s or the 90s when you could do it and people would kind of forget about it. This is the legacy that they are leaving behind. And it's just like, stop. So let's talk about being a heretic for a minute. A fundamental heretic of everything that's going on right now in the culture. It's just a lonely place to be sometimes, Like racism, for example. Everybody talks about racism all day. I won't even discuss racism with people. And they find that really hard to get over, that I won't discuss it. But, it's a subject that's loved by the left and the right and everything in between. It's a school of thought that was created by the Bolshevik revolutionary Leon Trotsky in the 1920s. And that's why I just won't talk about it with people. It has only existed as a mindset and a school of thought for 100 years, which is nothing. That's less than Mormonism, right? And it was created by a Bolshevik communist. And you have an entire nation of people and world of people who seem to only think about racism 24 hours a day. And when you won't have that discussion with people, they seem to almost blow their tops. They begin to short circuit. Like their coding can't handle that. And Leon Trotsky, who created racism as a school of thought, is not really Leon Trotsky, by the way. His real name was Lev Bronstein, and he traveled to Russia from New York to exact his revenge on the Russians as a Bolshevik leader and helped genocide millions of people. See, he ran away from Russia years before that. And they changed their name when they're doing things like this. So, after he moved to Russia, changed his name to Leon Trotsky, and then helped murder millions of people, he moved back to the United States and assumed his old name. This is what they do, right? And speaking of Bolshevik revolutions and genocides, that is exactly what will end up happening here in the United States if we continue on the course that we're headed. Or it will be attempted, at least. Or it will be done under the cover of another quote-unquote pandemic. Because this is what happens to countries who begin to realize what is happening from within. And if you know your history, you know that this isn't and wouldn't be the first time that this has happened. So, you have people like Nick Fuentes, who tells people to keep gaining power, hide that you're based, climb to the top of the ladder and just wait. But that kind of ideology and that kind of thinking is naive at best. And it lets me know that someone like Fuentes doesn't really know their history from a realistic point of view. Because the powers that be would rather blow this whole thing up, crash our economy, crash our society, and send us spiraling into a world that resembles Treaty of Versailles, Germany, than allow this country to become nationalist. It's been their globalist golden goose shithole for too long, and they simply will not allow that to happen. And they never have allowed that to happen. Study Russia, the real history of Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution and the causes, or Germany in the 1910s, the teens, the 20s, and ultimately Germany through the 1930s. You hear a lot about this kind of stuff, but you never hear the real cause or how these nations were collapsed. And that is exactly what they are planning to do here if it keeps going this way. This is why so many installed speakers and talk show hosts are going totally mask off and openly threatening people, openly lying, and openly saying anything they want at this point. Because, for one, they're afraid, but they also know that they have their Samson option, so to speak, and they'll just blow the whole thing up. And back to what I was talking about being heretical in this day and age, the fundamental differences don't just stop with merely talking race with people. It's everything. It's a fundamental difference from the very core. You can be having a perfectly normal conversation with someone, and that someone might bring somebody that you both know up or whatever, and that someone you're having a conversation with will say, oh, and so-and-so was diagnosed with bipolar, so they do really have it. And you're thinking, wait, what? What do you mean they really have it? What do you mean they were diagnosed with it? They really have it? Like that's some sort of proof. Like there is a test for bipolar that you can get an x-ray or a test and it really shows that they have bipolar, right? A conclusive test. It's like, no, some shrink talked to them for a little while and decided that they have bipolar. There is no test for it. There's no test for any of that. But those people believe it, man. Hook, line, and sinker. And when you think so fundamentally different from the masses, you are truly a heretic. And you just have to sit back and wait, hoping that the rest of the world will eventually catch up so that you can actually carry on a conversation with somebody. And moving on, YouTube has been up to their old tricks. Now they're promoting all these, over-the-top videos to people. They're not saying that the events happen with real patsies or MK Ultra and Voice of God weapon victims being driven to do things. They're claiming that all these people are actors or it's a green screen and zero part of it is real. Then it strangely becomes completely authoritarian again, just like the MSM. And why is that? It's because the same people operating the MSM are the same people putting out these wild, demoralizing, discrediting theories out there. They can't help but behave the exact same way, no matter what information they're promoting or what information they are dealing with. Be wary of this kind of shit. And another thing that I want to address right now is generations. Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, and Zoomers. I was listening to a millennial the other day, pretty well-known millennial, on YouTube talking. And he said that basically anybody before millennials are all the same. He's like, Gen X, Boomers, it's all the same. And I really sat back and was like, what, dude? If you're saying that, you don't know anything about history at all. Let me explain this to you. Boomers, the ease that they had it. They were the canned food generation. As they grew up and got jobs, if they didn't like that job, they could walk across the street and get another job that paid the same or better. You could go from one place to another to another. It didn't matter. And those jobs would pay you enough to do quite a bit with your money. Those are boomers. They're the ones being blamed for a lot of this, right? And I grew up in an industrial town, right? In an industrial area. All of these people talked about this. You know, you'd hear these people talking and they would say, oh yeah, if we didn't like the job at the steel mill or this little fabrication shop here, we could walk across the street and get a job at Ford or at this place or whatever. You know, that was the lifestyle. And they also lived during the age when their Social Security, or the father's Social Security would go to the mother, and if something happened to her, it would go to somebody else. It would go to the children. Now it goes back into the pot. Life was completely different for boomers. Totally. So there's a big difference between boomers and Gen X. And now to me, Gen X should be divided up into two generations because they're very different. You have Generation X before Nixon and then Generation X after Nixon. They're very, very different people because the kids that were young enough to watch Nixon get caught and go down are all true believers now in the Democratic Party. And as clowny as that sounds, it's totally true. All of those dudes, they all believe that the Democrats are the party of the people, right? And that the Republicans are the evil, evil people. They fully believe in the left and right wing thing. Where Generation Xers who were born after Nixon are way closer to millennials than they are those guys. They have a completely different attitude about politics and social issues. They are totally different fundamentally. There is a big difference between Gen Xers and boomers. They are not the same thing. They're not even close to the same thing. The boomers grew up on land that was chopped up and sold to their parents as subdivision properties. It was very easy. The GI Bill, to give all these people land so that they could become property owners. Why do these generations even exist? They exist because of the garbage that we're fed and the garbage that is happening in our country due to the shenanigans going on. They shouldn't exist at all, but they do exist. So it would be like Zoomers calling millennials boomers, and it just shows a fundamental ignorance of everything. The after Nixon Gen Xers are closer to millennials than the Gen X who were born in, let's say 65. There's a big difference. And they grew up with the same type of culture, video games, toys, although the characters were different. The period was the same. And later Gen Xers had pre-internet. A lot of the kids were on BBS systems, shit like that. So later Gen Xers and millennials are real close. It's Zoomers that are totally different. They were raised so safe with helmets and bullshit and iPads and craziness that they are truly, truly different than the rest. The 90s kids were more protected, for sure. The millennials from the 90s were clearly more protected, but Zoomers are on a different level completely. That's the difference. Boomers had the same tough, unprotected lifestyle as Gen Xers. But Gen Xers Especially most latter Gen Xers, they don't have anything either. Just like millennials. They're scraping by. There is a big difference between Gen Xers and boomers. Boomers and the first chunk of Gen X, the very first chunk, they can totally believe in the system. I mean, they believe in the system. True believers, man. Where millennials and that last half of Gen X are way more skeptical of all of it because they've seen it all erode and crumble. It's a completely different attitude. Look out for Charlie.